All right, so I'm going to go ahead and record and kind of do an introduction. Again, this is Tom Holder from Speaking of Research, who has asked me to be a guest writer on the website. I'm going to do an informational interview with him and see what kind of great details we can get about being a wonderful research advocate. So I don't know, let's start out with maybe you can tell me a little bit about yourself, a little introduction.
My story in this begins as a Oxford student where I was studying politics, philosophy and economics. I've always had an interest in science. I've always been relatively strong at science, but I decided to go for this, for a politics, philosophy and economics degree because it interested me. And the time that I was there coincided with a very large animal rights movement in the same city. So Oxford University was trying to build a new biomedical facility, and the activists, a group called Speak, they'd originally been Stop Primate Experimentation at Cambridge, and then when Cambridge stopped its lab and cancelled it and Oxford started trying to build a lab, it became Speak with a K, because apparently Speow doesn't have the same ring to it. So they came across and there was a lot of violence towards, so there was a communique saying all students were legitimate targets, and we were seeing bombs in colleges, particularly, I think the last straw for many students was a bomb in the student-run, student-owned boat houses that caused about £500,000 worth of damage.
Wow.
And from that, many students were getting annoyed and frustrated, including myself, but it also made us, made me look at the issue. So at first, the animal rights argument seemed very compelling. They tell you things like, well, it might work on an animal, but you don't know if it's going to work on a human, and every major advance is actually being due to some earlier human technology. And the more you look into it, the more you realise that actually this is rubbish. It sounds good, but the facts aren't there. And the deeper you dig, the more trickery you find in some of the claims that are made.
Yes.
The more they're selectively missing bits out, key parts of the story to fit their worldview here.
Absolutely.
And that upset me as someone who believes in academic rigour, academically rigorous university. And the more I looked at this issue, I realised that firstly, animal research was imperative to medical progress, and that secondly, it wasn't something to just be agreed with, it was something to be defended. And so I started talking to varying people, and then out of the blue, a 16-year-old called Laurie Pycroft held a one-man demonstration. He went into a shop on the same day of an animal rights demo, bought a pen and some paper and wrote, "Build the Oxford lab," and held it out. And people were like, "Oh, what are you talking about? It's terrible, it's cruel and it's evil." And he stood up because he knew that his grandfather was alive because of research that was pioneered in animals. He was a very precocious 16-year-old. And he went home and he blogged about his day. And someone, an absolute genius, somewhere on the internet went, "Oh, that's brilliant. When are you having your next protest?"
Oh, wow.
And so the name Protest was born. And this got a little side, it got 3 sentences in the student paper. And I've been talking to a lot of people, and suddenly I'm like, this kid's done what no one else has dared. So I got in contact, a few other people got in contact, and we formed the protest committee because we told Laurie that, this is an amazing idea, you're daring to do what no one else is, but if you want to make this work, you need the students on board, because you're just a local school child, so you don't quite have the same support network that we can build, that core student body.
Yeah.
And Protest was born. Originally, it was an anonymous committee, because we were all petrified of being attacked.
Yeah.
So you had these wonderful statements to the press that would go a bit like this: "We should all stand together and come out and march on February 25th in support of animal research," said an anonymous spokesman from Protest. So we realised that if we were going to go and stand up, like we want other people to stand up there, we had to come out. So it was, I'm Tom Holder, this is Laurie Pycroft, Ian Simpson, Christina Cook, James Panton, a whole host of people. And we are protest, and we are standing up to support life-saving medical research. We are standing up against extremism. Stand with us. And that was how protest was born.
That is amazing. I love that. So have you ever worked in an animal facility yourself?
No, I've been to plenty of animal facilities. I've never worked in an animal facility. I've never held a license to. And I probably find it really hard. Actually, the work that's done, it would be emotionally very difficult. I was brought up with animals, but I respect the need to do it, and I also respect the huge care that research staff and animal care staff have for these animals, and how vital it is that we explain this care so that other people realise that it's not some, cruel torture facility, but actually necessary science going on, with animal welfare being a very, very high priority.
Absolutely. So what was your first job out of, well, I guess I would say you started doing this in college. So I guess in college you probably started the whole protest and all that. Let's go with what was your first job out of high school?
Out of high school? So just as because I know the wording tends to change here, but so for me there'll be school, sixth form, which is like 2 years just before uni, then uni,
Okay.
which is complicated a little bit because Oxford, unlike most universities, also has colleges within it. But yeah, generally university. So after university, where I got my first proper job, I mean, I've been a bartender and things like that prior, but my first proper job was moving to the US. I moved to Washington, D.C., and I got the Michael D. Hare Fellowship in Public Outreach to work with Americans for Medical Progress, who are a non-profit organisation that explain the role of animals in research. They had seen what I'd done with protest, and they wanted me to try and emulate that within the US. So I came over there, and under Americans for Medical Progress, I founded an organisation called Speaking of Research, and I went around giving talks across the US. I think I did about 15 or 20 states, which turns out to actually beat a lot of people that live in America in terms of traffic out there.
Yes.
And that was absolutely fantastic. Always a little odd because I would almost certainly be the youngest person in the room, and I'm usually the person at the podium talking. It was for some people, I think it was that little wake-up call on how to talk. For some people, it was just a nice motivational talk from someone that you couldn't possibly fall asleep in a talk in, because I tend to run around and act things, generally be far too loud for any kind of Monday morning listening exercise. And from there, I worked for them for 7-8 months, and then I returned to the UK. And I kept up Speaking of Research, and I sort of pulled it slightly away from Americans for Medical Progress. We decided it was better as a independent organisation, which until still now has no real funding. We were using money which we had left over in the protest account for a while to run the website. And then last year we started asking our readers if they would contribute up to $10 each. Just to make the $150, $200 that we needed to survive each year. And we got that and a little bit more, which is fantastic. I must thank all our people who have supported Speaking of Research. And then my next job was very different. Unsure what to do, but living in a family where everyone either was or had been a teacher, I went into teaching. I joined something called Teach First, which is the British version of Teach for America. So it puts the aim is putting smart graduates who might not think of teaching straight into the classroom with 6 weeks training and getting them to reflect and learn on the job in inner city schools with high levels of child deprivation in terms of child poverty and similar things like that. I went in primarily as a maths teacher, but I ended up teaching a lot of economics, business and philosophy. And all the meantime, I was keeping up with Speaking of Research, and occasionally I'd end up doing like TV slots and things like that, which was great. love doing things like that. I love trying to communicate the importance of research to people. And after 3 years of teaching, which was wonderful but exhausting, and I have so much respect for people that keep up the career, I decided that I wanted to return. I missed talking about science and animal research, and an opportunity arose for me to work for the British non-profit Understanding Animal Research. And I took that. I've been there for 2.5 years as the campaigns manager, and which is a role they created. No one really knows what I do, which is brilliant, because then no one knows that I'm not doing it. And that puts me to now.
So you do both still, correct? You're keeping up the speaking of research. So are you on that on your own then?
So I should say Speaking of Research is a committee, mainly of scientists and others. So it's a group of volunteers, some of the people I met during my travels. The group has changed over the years. There's probably only 2 or 3 people of the original group who are still, because, every year or two someone says, there's too much on my plate, or I've moved jobs, I need to drop out because I can't bear getting another 1,000 emails today. And we're like, well, you've been amazing, thank you so much for everything you've done. And then someone else is like, do you know what, I want to speak about research. And we're like, you're having you. As long as you agree to write some things occasionally, you're ours, and we're never letting go for as long as you continue to write for us. While I desperately try and motivate people and hit them over the head to write things at the same time, in a very carefully balanced act of carrot and stick. But there are an amazing bunch of people who have been working immensely hard. We have people in the US, we have people in Canada, we have people in Italy, we have people in Portugal, we have people in the UK. We're always looking to expand. They are a fantastic bunch and work really hard to explain the role of animals in research. And Speaking of Research has seen so much growth as a website, from the 26,000 hits we got in our first year, or views, I should say. I think we're up at well over 600,000 in 2014.
Wow.
And we're hoping, I would love to be able to get over 1 million hits this year. That's just in this year, not cumulative. So we're really growing at sort of a 50-60% rate per year, which is absolutely fantastic.
That is absolutely awesome. Yes, I love that. So we've kind of touched on how did you make the choice to get into this. So I'll move on. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis between understanding animal research and speaking for research, or speaking of research?
Good question. My boss sometimes asks me that as well. I work a lot in the social media realm, so I spend a lot of my days spent trying to make sure there's constant stories up online that just explain the role of animal research. What we're trying to do isn't glorify it, it's normalise it. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is make people realise that animal research is just a normal part of biological sciences, that it's only done where there's no other alternative, where the benefits or potential benefits to humans outweigh the potential harm caused to the animals, and that all efforts are made alongside, in accordance with the 3 R's, replacement, refinement, reduction, to reduce the suffering of animals as far as possible in all research. And I'm there to explain that, do a lot of that online. I keep an eye on a lot of animal rights groups just to see what they're doing and to try and debunk some of the utter nonsense sometimes that they write. I try and find opportunities to get more people to speak up. I occasionally sneakily write Speaking of Research posts in my Understanding Animal Research time, but they seem to be okay with that. And I spend a lot of time trying to help network different people together and making sure, everyone who needs to be aware of things knows what's going on. And then I come up with crazy ideas. So last year, my exciting project that I did as campaigns manager was to try and organise the big animal research debate. So I got 30 different universities, their debating organisations, to hold, each one would hold a debate at their university over the same 4-day period. So we would get essentially we were getting 8, 9 a day. We have one in the US who got involved. I can't remember which university it was off the top of my head. And then we had a whole host, including Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, the top British universities were all involved in this, and some schools decided to jump in, some high schools decided to jump in on the event, and overall we got everyone to debate exactly the same motion, which is this House would ban all forms of animal research. Every single university rejected the motion. Overall, over 2,000 votes were cast, and about 80% rejected the motion to ban animal research. So only about 1 in 5 people supported that. It was a really good exercise. It allowed a lot of people to look at the issue, often for the first time, and get an opportunity to make up their mind. I thought it was a valuable event, and I'm considering trying to run a similar one again.
Well, that would be outstanding, and I would love to, let me know if you do. I'd love to kind of watch up that as well. So what kind of skills, for somebody like me who's really starting to get into this, what kind of skills does it take to be successful?
In science communication, as opposed to actually doing the research, because you know better than me what you need as a day-to-day sort of scientist and technician, but are you talking about in the sort of how to explain it and those type of skills?
We'll go with for now that I'm blogging, what kind of skills does it take to keep that up running and maybe I don't know if I'll be able to get as successful as you are, but get that going and be that popular. Maybe what does it take what kind of skills do you need to be able to stand up in front of everybody and say, like, this is where I stand?
So, with the blogging, it tends to be perseverance, and, because you start off trying to get 10 or 20 views of your article, or where you get really happy because you managed to get 100 people to see it over a couple of days, and that takes some work, and what you've got to do is keep bugging all your friends, everyone you know who obviously has some interest, because there's too much stuff on the internet to just get picked up randomly.
Right.
Unless you happen to do it by chance. I mean, it can happen. You can put it out to as many different social networks as possible, and if you want some people to discover for the first time, I suggest looking up Reddit as an amazing resource for getting a load of people who, because there's no social networks on Reddit, it's not like you have your circle of friends, you just find a category, which might be something like, for a blog post, we often use everything science, or if we're debunking something, it might be skeptics. And sometimes a post will die without being seen, and then we've had a situation where in pretty much a weekend we managed 100,000 views of an article on paralysis, if I remember correctly. Whereas getting that sort of volume with Facebook, Twitter, very difficult. We've managed it once with a story about cats, as the internet is in fact made of cats. That was because there was a picture that was going around Twitter of cats seemingly sort of connected to boards, and it'd been going around Twitter being like, this is animal testing. And in fact, it was, we found the photo in a newspaper, so we tracked down the original image. It was a load of cats that had been being hoarded by some animal lover, but somebody who wasn't really capable of looking after them, and they were going to spay and neuter these 300 cats in pretty much a day. So they'd been anaesthetised, they'd been prepared, so it was easy for them to be spayed and neutered, ready for adoption. And of course you've got a load of people who love animals and therefore felt that they should be rejecting this animal testing, actually rejecting a picture of spaying and neutering. And somewhere along the line, an activist has taken that photo, has known where it comes from, and has twisted its meaning to fit a different agenda, which is something I find really quite offensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, personal regularity in your blogs, you want people to know how often things are coming up, and to try and get things as regularly as possible. I would always say you really need something like once a week to be up. if you can. And in terms of standing up on stage, you've got to just remember that you're right. What you're doing is right. There's a load of people who conservatively do not want to talk about what they do, but you are right in wanting to talk up about it. It is not a problem that will go away, and that self-confidence to go, I am here because there is a message I need to get out, and have fun. People imagine that people are good at speaking on stage don't get the butterflies in their stomach every time they think about it. I do. But the difference is I've learned to love that feeling. I love that feeling of being nervous and butterfly stomach and, shivers down the spine, looking at an audience. I love it. It's the same as if I go on radio or TV or anything. It's an absolute kick to know you're going to go out there and then go and have fun and tell a story and make it personal. Tell them your story because people connect with that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is with almost anything you aspire to do, but particularly public speaking, when you finish, reflect on it. And people tend to be very critical of themselves, and that's fine to be somewhat critical, but you need two things. You need what was good, and there is always something good. If the first time you go out, it's I didn't throw up within 20 seconds, I made it to 35, fine, that was what was done good. And then it's not things that are done badly, it's just things that can improve. How could you make it better for next time? Because if you just if you just pile on criticism, you end up sort of digging yourself a hole. Whereas if you frame it in the way of how could things have improved, what could do better, you already think you're on a positive track and you're already preparing yourself for next time. You're not scaring yourself off from next time. Other than that, there are hundreds of bits of advice you'll find on the internet. I mean, I still do presentations on I talk through them. I've sat through a lot of science presentations. I've been to a lot of science conferences. I've sat at a lot of science presentations. Some people need support in presentations when it comes to PowerPoint. The crime of reading your PowerPoint slides, generally just don't have any words on. Just use pictures that are really big reminders from you, because you never want to take people away from what you're trying to say, what your message is. Whereas if you've got a load of words, and regardless if you're reading it off or you're not, people are their brain is automatically reading, because that's what we do. They're forgetting everything you say. And then, people find their own talking types. So there's no right way. I'm quite explosive and dynamic, and I want to jump around and tell people and gesticulate wildly and act as an activist. And I've got my little jokes that develop. Something turns out to be funny, and then it actually turns out to be a repetitive joke. But I pretend it's, an off-the-cuff joke every time, and then swear never to go back and give a talk to the same place twice. But I've seen fantastic talkers who sit on the edge of their chair, speaking quietly, and every single person cranes in to hear what they've got to say. And that works for them. So it's about finding what works for you. And finding where your confidence is. It's your presentation in your style to suit the message that you want to give. And I still have loads to learn about presenting, and every time I do it, I think maybe I'm getting a little bit better at it. I love doing it. And my last bit of weird advice is water is a really awkward drink to wet the back of your throat. Take a sugary drink. It's some weird lesson I learned years ago, was that, especially for radio, where you don't really want to kind of lose your voice momentarily, is a sweet drink is a lot better at wetting the back of your throat and making sure you don't dry up than water is.
That is amazing. I would have never thought of that.
Apple juice is brilliant. So yeah, that was my weird last fact, because everyone needs a weird last fact.
That is amazing. So, what do you enjoy most about doing this?
I love trying to bring people over on side. I mean, I'm a politics, philosophy, economics graduate, just out of PPE. It's a degree which is quite special. I mean, there are a few universities that do it, but Oxford's famous for it, and it's famous for it because it's the degree of politicians. Our Prime Minister has it, the Leader of the Opposition has it, three of the other people that tried to challenge the Leader of the Opposition to be Leader of the Opposition have it. It's a degree which basically attracts people that like to argue and be right. And although I think I've reflected and am slightly more humble than maybe I once was, and than certainly many politicians are. In fact, teaching is the most humbling job you'll ever do, because they couldn't care who you are or what you have to say. Either it's about what you can provide them,
right.
Education. And yeah, so from this, I like a little bit. I still relish a little bit of confrontation, and so getting into like debates and going on like radio against someone or TV against someone, I love doing that. You have to think on your feet. You've got to be prepared. If I'm on the radio, I'll have sheets of paper in front of me with all the facts that I possibly could want at any one time. With little, I will have one-liners written out, prepared, that I can just read off in case I need them. And I know what's there. I also know the facts I'm going to use. And I know their arguments because I've heard it a billion times before, because they haven't changed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Sometimes, the same argument gets dressed in a different coat, but it's the same bloody argument.
Right.
And I have, my counters and my debunkings ready to deal with it. And that is, I've had some truly entertaining debates before. Sometimes, it's been a stalemate at the end. I've probably come out worse a few times. But there have also been some times where I've come out and just, you almost feel sorry for the person you've gone up against because they're woefully underprepared. I love writing to try and convince people, bring them over on side. But I think I just like to motivate people. So I like being in a room of people who are kind of supportive, because I like the idea that by the end of it, we're all going to be standing on our chairs, waving a flag, getting ready to just have a rally. And I love rallies. I have been the MC, the Master of Ceremonies at the first protest rally, the second protest rally, the third protest rally in Oxford, the first and second UCLA protest rallies, which I've spoken at, and I spoke at the Protest Italia rally in Milan in 2000 and, I want to say, 12 or 13. Because that's huge amounts of fun. It was funny, the Italians don't really do chanting at a rally, and so it was left to me to start all the chants, and I don't speak a king word of Italian, so I was trying to do it. I wonder if I can still remember. Lottiamo per la ricerca, lottiamo per la vita. I think that's right. Otherwise, I might have said something completely wrong. I apologise for every Italian who listens to this. It basically meant fight for research, fight for life. And there was me just yelling this out and getting everyone to chant along. It can be a massive action. I really... what's the word I'm looking for? I gain my energy from other people.
Well, I think you are an excellent motivator. So what, and there's probably, I think I know where you're going to go with this. What is your least favorite thing about working in this type of field?
Annoyed sometimes at some of the arguments I see. Some of them are so obviously wrong. I will tell you my favourite wrong fact, because it shows how someone can twist something. Here's the fact. Did you know, take this with a pinch of salt, and make sure you listen to the whole explanation before you take home this fact to your friends and family. Did you know that only 45% of living Nobel Prize winners in physiology and medicine support the use of animals in research? Only 45%. With this sort of suggestion that maybe the other 55% disagree. Anyway, how did we get this figure? There was a survey done years ago of all the living Nobel Prize winners, so they're not cheating, not getting dead people and saying they didn't vote. All the living Nobel Prize winners in physiology and medicine going like, do you think animal research is important? About 50% replied. And of the 50% that replied, like 90% or 90-something% said, yeah, animal research is really important. So they got their 50% who replied and multiplied it by their 90% who said yes, and said, well, of the whole lot, even though 50% never got back to us, only 45% of the total thought animal research was crucial. What they don't tell you is 50% didn't answer and only 5% disagreed. And that's twisting facts in a way that infuriates me. And I see this, and I see some of these infiltration videos, and things can look shocking, and then I hear about how some of it's been done. So a while ago, the BUAV infiltrated Cambridge University and took videos of a slightly distressed-looking sheep that had a sort of Huntington's-like disease, and Cambridge put out a very solid statement and noted that these animals are never left on their own. What someone has done is taken one sheep out of its pen, the infiltrator, who obviously was pretending to work or was working there, but with the aim of filming, and has taken it out and then just filmed it on its own for a while, looking kind of distressed because it's on its own and it's got a Huntington's-like disease, which obviously also makes it appear distressed, and then gone, look, distressed animals. Or they've, there was a situation in Oregon, I think it was Oregon, where the National Primate Centre, where there's a video of a monkey that's looking distressed. It's sort of it's shaking and it's hugging its leg, and they sent the full video to the USDA. And if you look at the full video, there's the 20 seconds before this little screenshot where there's a perfectly happy-looking monkey in its enclosure, and then the camera, which is a giant big eye, just gets closer and closer and closer until it's right up against the cage, at which point the monkey goes ballistic and starts getting really scared and hugging itself. You're like, you are scaring these animals and then filming the reaction. I mean, this is sick.
That's absurd. Yes. Yeah, that's where I figured that was my feelings, and I kind of had the thought that you would feel the same way. So the last question I have here is, what piece of advice would you give for someone who is trying to get into this, like myself?
As someone who's trying to get into this, I would recommend that you come and write 1,000 articles for Speak of Research every day, and that solves all our issues. No, that you talk about it, and the first step is talk to friends and family, and there are scientists that don't tell their family what they do. Fortunately, I think that kind of culture is going away, and that's a really good thing. Tell friends and family, stand up, and next time someone's talking about they're making some off-the-cuff remark about, I saw this, at a dinner table, so there's a dinner table with friends, and someone's like, I don't ever buy products that have been tested on animals, and, stand up and go, oh, I did notice actually that you're diabetic, and a moment ago you checked yourself with insulin. That was developed thanks to dogs and research on animals, so I can understand if you're uncomfortable with maybe cosmetic research, or cosmetic testing, I should say. Fine, it's banned in the UK. I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think it should go on. I think there is enough scope for either replacement technologies in some cases, or for the rest that the end probably doesn't justify the means in those situations. But medical research, most of us have reaped the rewards of it, and it would be hypocritical to then throw that under a bus. So, talk to friends and standing up for it, telling people what you do, and the key to telling people what you do is to be proud and to say it positively. I do something in biology. There's a lab. I work at a lab. What do you do? I work around doing this and that with research into epilepsy. People are going to get more and more curious. They think you're hiding something. I work with mice. I'm looking at research into epilepsy. I'm hoping that we'll discover some of the biological pathways that could help us essentially understand what goes on with epilepsy, and maybe we'll get hints on how we could treat it. And, you're not making a big thing of animals necessarily, but you're mentioning it and you're normalising it. Mm-hmm. I'll give you a wonderful story to illustrate. I was in the pub with a friend, and she had some of her friends, and I had not met one of her friends. And this person, we got chatting, I was pretty flirting a bit, and normal, so what do you do for a living? And I gave this, decided not to worry, thought I'd go straight. I explained the role of animals in medical research. I explained why it's really imperative that if we are going to have the medicines tomorrow, that we're allowed to research. And, you should realise that 98% of that is rodents, fish and birds in the UK, and that the rules prevent it being done where it is unnecessary. There are high regulations, this, that, blah, 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 blah. That sounds interesting. So what do you do? I've never seen someone quite so embarrassed. I just got a new job. I actually work. I work for PETA now. Peter, however you'd say them. Yeah. But I think the animal research is fine. I'm just not so sure about farming or something like that, and that's fine. I understand. I do eat meat, but actually I can see there's a lower justification and all that. But it was the fact that she was both embarrassed and immediately trying to support my point of view. And, that shows the power of just being forthcoming. Whereas, had she gone first or had I been weaker, I think she would have come out with I'm not sure about that. Right. I kind of disagree. Actually, I work to disagree a lot of the time in animal research. That's, I write blogs and I explain that. Had I come across maybe second or not as strongly, but actually, you make people think, and they're like, "Oh crap, he's put across a really strong argument on why animal research is important," and I'm basically anti-medicine if I'm not supporting this. So yeah, that's my. I can't remember what the question is, but I think I answered it.
Yes, yeah, you did. Because just to share a story that I have, I've been nervous to tell people what I do for a long time because I'm afraid, like most people in the field, I'm afraid of PETA coming and terrorizing me at home, or do you hear the stories of them throwing the red paint or whatever? That terrified me for years. So I was always scared, and when people would ask me, I'd just say, I'm getting into research, and they'd say, what are you doing? I'm doing something on diabetes, or I'm working on metabolic disease. I just kind of try to throw it under the rug. But the longer I've been in the field and the more that I learn, like you said, if you just speak up and be strong, people will listen and they'll say, okay, well, yeah, you're right. You got to give people facts. And I just responded to a post on LinkedIn that really got me thinking. The younger the people are that you're speaking to, and you make it seem not such a bad thing to the younger group, middle school, elementary school, start bringing it up to them, then they'll grow up and realize that, well, this isn't so bad, and all these stories I've heard, this isn't terrible, and we could get more people on our side that way. So yeah, just probably within the last year, I think I've really started being more open about what I do. And when people ask me, well, what kind of animals do you work with? And I'll tell them. And I've had a few people...
Unicorns.
Yeah. I've had a few people go, oh, you're one of those? And I'm just, I guess, if that's what... Sure, I'm one of those. Whatever one of those means to you. Sure. So...
But you'll get it, it's very rarely, and be proud. And actually, this is where I've been to labs, but I'm not the one who should be telling people what a lab's like, because you work there every day. Not pets, they have, your average PETA employee has sweet FA idea of what animal research looks like, or what a lab looks like.
Right.
I've seen their video game, which is meant to take place in a lab, with sort of blood spatters across the
Yes.
walls. And
Yes.
It's ludicrous because it has no base in reality, and you could be like, well, I see these things, and that's not. I go in every day to a lab. Let me show you a picture of what a lab looks like. This is my lab every day of the week.
Yeah.
Held to the highest standards that we can, because that's what makes good research. This is why people like yourself need to come out and talk. I sometimes think that particularly the technologists, the technicians, are sort of an underused resource when it comes to public advocacy on this issue, because your aim in the labs is to make sure that animal welfare is of a high standard, and that is something that is laudable to everyone. We all applaud and support that type of aim. So I think your voice adds so much to this issue for people. And go into schools, go talk to your local schools. I mean, UAR organises over 300 school talks every year. We either do some of them ourselves, or we send, wherever we can, we send scientists in to give the talks. And,
I'm making a note to do that.
University needs a little system where it can do that, where it offers, where it has a pool of 5 people who are willing to go to the local schools, where it invites the local school round, it gives them a tour of the lab. I mean, there is no better way for a kid to know that PETA are not telling the truth than seeing the truth for themselves.
Absolutely, I agree. Yes.
So that's, I think, a really big thing.
It is. It is. That is all the questions that I have written down. And I think we've pretty well covered everything. I'm going to turn the recording off now with a great big thank you.
That's no problem.